Hey everybody, welcome back to Horror Trans. My name is Stephanie Bree. This is I'm a transgender woman, and my channel I talk about all things horror, and I'm putting horror reviews on hold for the rest of December. So this week I'm just going to be doing a horror icons video, and today we're talking about the Ghostbusters. Now Ghostbusters is more of a comedy than a horror, but it's in the horror family. It's a horror comedy, um, technically. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ghostbusters as a franchise, but we're talking about them as a horror icon. So we're only going to talk about the first two movies because those are the two with the most horror-like elements in them. I don't think Answer the Call or Afterlife are very much horror. I mean, they're in the same, I guess, the same realm, but the first one especially has the scariest moments out of all of them, and I think the second one, with the painting and the candles and the slime and everything, it definitely has some horror vibes to it. So the Ghostbusters started in 1984, and it was a movie about these three scientists who figured out a way to catch ghosts and trap them in a makeshift ghost prison. So the gist is basically they're hunting ghosts, and there's an evil entity known as Gozer, who is a Sumerian god, and Gozer is sending the ghosts to New York City to basically open a door so that Gozer can come into Earth and destroy humanity, which is that's the gist of it. And the Ghostbusters have to find out a way to defeat Gozer. Now, Ghostbusters does have a lot of comedic elements to it. It is primarily a comedy. But when I was a kid, I thought it was a pretty scary movie, and it has some some very horror-like elements. There's the scene where the Zool creature comes out of the chair and abducts Dana Barrett, which would be Sigourney Weaver's character, and pulls her into the kitchen, which was a pretty scary scene. And there's the scene where the gargoyle breaks open and unleashes another Zool, and that Zool chases Louis Tully through Central Park until it possesses him. And then the two, known as the Gatekeeper and the Keymaster, get together and open the door for Gozer. And then Gozer, at first, comes out looking like a naked woman. Not too scary. But then Gozer dissolves and goes up into the sky. And you hear an ominous voice telling the Ghostbusters that it's going to send a destructor to kill them. And they have to choose Gozer's form, and the Ghostbusters one of the Ray Stantz chooses the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, so you get a 100-foot Marshmallow Man wandering around New York City. So the first two Ghostbusters have another horror element, which is the kaiju. You have the giant Marshmallow Man in Ghostbusters, and then you have the Statue of Liberty in Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters 2 continues the story, and the Ghostbusters have been sued out of business for summoning a ancient god to destroy New York City. Even though they stopped the god, they're still blamed for it. And so they're no longer Ghostbusters until they discover a pink slime underneath the sewers, in the old subway systems, the abandoned subway systems. And what they learn is the pink slime is made out of evil. It's pure evil. And it feeds on emotions, human emotions. And they, during a trial where they're arrested for digging a hole in the middle of the road to get to the slime, and in violation of a restraining order that forbids them to work as Ghostbusters, they accidentally unleash two really scary ghosts, the Scoleri brothers. And this prompts the judge to rescind the restraining order and then allows them to go back to busting ghosts. Meanwhile, the painting in the museum is possessed by a very evil spirit that is drawing energy from the pink slime. And this spirit possesses one of the museum workers. And the museum worker kidnaps the baby of Dana Barrett so that the evil spirit can come out of the painting at midnight on New Year's Eve and enter the body of the baby and get to be reborn and get to rule the world. And so the Ghostbusters have to break into the museum and stop the evil painting ghost spirit from possessing the child, which ultimately they do. So obviously Afterlife continues this story with Gozer, but I don't want to dig into Afterlife too much. But most of your scary elements, your horror elements, come from obviously the ghosts. Aside from Slimer, most of your ghost designs in Ghostbusters are intended to be scary. The library ghost is scary. The cab driver is scary. Gozer is scary. Zool and the Zools are scary. You know, the ghosts are supposed to be scary. Slimer, on the other hand, is intended to be comic relief. So he's like a ghost, but he's not a scary ghost. He's I guess you would say funny ghost. Kind of. And, so in the 80s, Ghostbusters was huge. And it spawned a whole bunch of video games and an animated TV series and a toy line and so on and so forth. So traditionally you have four Ghostbusters. You have Dr. Peter Venkman. You have Egon Spengler. You have Ray Stantz, and then you have Winston Zeddemore. Those are the four Ghostbusters. And each one brings something different to the table. The core three are scientists of sorts. They're paranormal investigators. So they're scientists studying the paranormal. Winston is just a regular Joe, a working class dude, who answered a now hiring call ad. And so he's not a scientist at all. So half the time he doesn't even understand what's going on. We see Egon is the brains of the Ghostbusters. Peter is the face of the Ghostbusters. And Ray is the heart of the Ghostbusters. And Winston is just the hired hand. And so those are your horror icons, the Ghostbusters. We do not get those four Ghostbusters in Answer the Call. And we get an assortment of them in Afterlife. But obviously Harold Ramis, the actor who played Egon Spengler, had passed away way before Afterlife came into existence. And so he appears himself in the movie as a ghost. So you do get all four Ghostbusters in Afterlife, but not technically. which is kind of weird. And then, as much as I like Answer the Call, it has nothing to do with the other three Ghostbusters, so it's a totally separate franchise. It's its own movie. It exists in its own alternate universe. And the ghosts in that movie are not scary. Those are like Casper type ghosts. They're not even intended to be scary. But I think the first Ghostbusters is a legit horror movie, even though it is more comedy than horror. I think it's, especially to a young child, a 5 or 6 year old, it's pretty scary. The Ghostbusters, as far as horror icons go, are unique because, for one, they're actually the heroes, the good guys, the protagonists. And, excuse me, they don't have special powers or superpowers. There's no final girl. There's no serial killer. There's no... I mean, there are supernatural forces, and they are evil forces, but they're not, like, murderous evil forces. For the most part, I would say nobody dies. Although there may be some incidental deaths during the ghost takeover sequences in both movies, but those aren't on screen, nor are they confirmed. But Ghostbusters 2 especially has a couple of horror elements that stick out. The first one, I would say, makes it a candidate for a horror discussion channel like this, is the subway scene, where they are walking around looking for the pink slime, and they encounter a host of decapitated heads stuck on spikes. And this is obviously scary to a young kid. And I would say Vigo himself is very much a horror element. He's a very bad guy. He's basically a sorcerer, an evil sorcerer, who traps his soul, his evil soul, in a painting, which would be a haunted object, and unleashes terrible ghosts on New York City to terrorize the people. While the ghosts in Ghostbusters 2, generally speaking, aren't as scary in their designs or in their behaviors as the ghosts in Ghostbusters 1, or the original Ghostbusters, they're still scary enough, especially the Scoleri brothers, who I've already talked about. Now, the cartoon digs a lot deeper into the lore and references ghosts from mythology, various mythologies, and so it, is a little deeper in the horror pantheon, although it is obviously a kids show and it is watered down considerably. The video games themselves, I would not say are, generally speaking, scary. So I wouldn't classify the video games as horror, per se. But they are based on a pseudo-horror franchise. And so this one was different. And I wanted to do something different because I wanted to do something that wasn't a filmmaker or a movie monster, more or less. And so I thought the Ghostbusters would be a good topic. And so I think as far as horror icons go, the Ghostbusters are extremely iconic. And they make an appearance as a reference in the Netflix television series Stranger Things, which is decidedly horror and does borrow elements from the Ghostbusters and makes reference to the Ghostbusters. So I think that also stretches Ghostbusters a little more firmly into the horror family. So, yeah, let me know what you think of the Ghostbusters. And go ahead and argue in the comments about which one's better. Stay cool.